we should get going so we have enough time for discussion. It gives me great pleasure, and I'm really grateful to Doina and Constantin to have made time to do this and share their work with us. They are at the GSD this semester, and one is grateful for their presence. They've been working with students with Dan Diopa's sort of studio, and one is grateful for the time they've made and the effort to participate in life here at the GSD. They are both co-founders of Atelier d'Architecture Autogay, and which has been recognized with several awards and recognitions. They won the Untitled Prize for Sustainability and Humanity in 2012, the Curry Stone Prize 2011, when they were here for a conference and seminar in this room, when at least I was first introduced to them. They also the recipients of the European Prize for Urban Public Space 2010, and several other such sort of recognition. They've both written extensively. Doina is a professor of architecture and design activism at the University of Sheffield. She is also the co-founder of the firm, and her research focuses on gender and space in contemporary society, co-design and participation. Her approach broadens the scope of architectural discourse by bringing cultural, social, and political issues to inform the design thinking process in architecture. And her research methodology combines approaches from architectural theory and design, contemporary art, social sciences, political philosophy, and feminist theory. She is the editor of The Social Reproduction of Architecture, which is going to be out next year. Altering Practices, Feminist Politics and Poetics of Space, which is 2007, and co-editor of Architecture and Participation, 2005. Urban Act, Agency Working with Uncertain Architectures, and Translocal Act, Cultural Practices Within and Across. These are books that span the last 3 or 4 years of her writing, so extensively sort of published and communicated some of these experiences of their very particular way of working and engaging with the public realm, but also urban conditions that have to do with sustainability and resilience, etc. Constantin is a Paris-based architect also whose work stresses the intersection between architecture, urbanism, and semiotics. He has co-founded the firm with Doina, and it's a collective that conducts explorations, actions, and research concerning socio-political practices in the contemporary city. This is, I think, the common ground that they work together on. And it is a practice which acts through urban tactics, as we can see on the screen there, and we're going to be exposed much more to their thinking on this. It encourages inhabitants to self-manage disused urban spaces, engage in nomadic and reversible projects, and initiating interstitial resilient practices. So it really works at the intersection of participation, communities, sustainability, resilience, but also in the process constructing beautiful space. So with that, I hand it over to them. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rahul, for such a wonderful introduction, and thanks to you for your interest, for the fact that you are here to listen to us. We have, so we will speak about our practice mainly through a number of projects. And we want also to speak about this notion of co-production, which has become a sort of buzzword in these austerity times. It's at least in Europe, it's quite discussed, and it's discussed in the context of speaking about the necessity to engage citizens in self-providing services in a context in which the welfare state services and facilities are not there anymore. And for this reason, co-production is understood mainly as an economic and in the best case, a social project. And for us, I think it's very much a political project. It is rooted somehow in this idea of Lefebvre about the social production of space, but it's not only about citizen needs, yeah? It's also about citizen rights, and in this case, citizen rights to the city. Not only the right to occupy space in the city, but the right to decide about how the city is built, is managed and used. And this right is even more urgent, we think, in these times of austerity and ecological challenge. So this political project needs ideas, needs tools, needs spaces, needs time and agency. And it needs also agents and activators. And we think that architects could be such agents, and that we can engage ourselves in a long-term social, economic, and ecological co-production of the city. And this is somehow what is our position as Atelier d'Architecture Autogérée, which is a practice that Constantin and myself founded in 2001, but we founded it as a collective practice that includes architects, artists, urban planner, landscape designers, sociologists, students, and maybe something that is very important also, residents and users of the spaces that we are creating. And for this reason also we set up the practice as an organization, as a non-governmental organization, in such a way that also it's a professional practice. It can include non-architects that can also, let's say, be part of the process of the project. And also another kind of political statement that we made is that we wanted to facilitate this reappropriation of space by the residents and the creation of places for new collective practices and reinvented urban commons. And we were, I think, we were committed to this approach, and we were also questioning what role the architects, when they are placing themselves as facilitators of such a process, would take. So we will exemplify now to a number of projects our different position that we have taken in this process, and how we managed to propose infrastructures and design this infrastructure in the agencies that would conduct to this reinvented urban commons. Another maybe parenthesis is on this notion of tactics, because for a number of years we called our practice urban tactics, and this is also the name of the website that still represents our practice. And we were, of course, concerned with this idea of tactics that the French sociologist Michel de Certeau has theorized. He has theorized that the tactics to speak about the practices of the dwellers of the city, the practices of resistance to, let's say, consumerist, capitalist society, and that these practices would take place at the level of everyday life. And for us, somehow, when we decided to call ourselves urban tactics, it was because we considered architecture as also an everyday life practice, and as everyday life practice that would align with all other everyday life practices. So our first project was EcoBox, and it started somehow by chance in one of these red dots area that we have mapped after a while. These are, in French, they are called zones urbaines sensibles, which are areas of social and economic deprivation, and of course they are situated in a particular area of at the north of Paris mainly. And but it happened that we were living in one of this area, and we were also studying with our students at the time the area in which we were living. So we have started with a double hat or a triple hat even, that one of residents, architects, and educators. And it just happened that the second project was also in the same type of area, Passage 56, And the third project that we will speak about, Rurban, is also in the same area. So somehow we strategically managed to act in the same kind of area in a coherent way. So the first project.
So we started in 2001, at the same time like resident on in 2001, being resident in this North Parisian area. So we discovered to be a very negative connoted area because with a lot of empty space, unused space, with a lot of unemployed people, with immigrants, very bad perceived, and with like an island urban situation, so very isolated between railways and highway, and so without any connection, urban connection with the rest of the city and of the rest of the cultural life of the city. So, being a resident and habitant, we decided together to try to develop a specific professional activity. So, being same time a resident and a professional architect. So, we started by mapping the empty space and to observe and to try to understand this population, leftover people. Leftover materials, because some of the empty space they are full with gravel, with pallets, so things possible to be reused for free. And some of the empty space like this one, they produce like by empathic action the disparition of the commercial activity in the neighborhood. And they remain like that for years and years, so they are pictures from 2001 and 2010, but there are more other people placed on empty space to remain like that a long time. So we decided, we tried in fact to transform this negative connoted aspect in positive ones. They was connoted negatively because they favorize the apparition of drug addicts, users of prostitutions, and for us it was like a possibility to be used in a temporary way, like some piece of land out of the private development profit, out of the logic of developing profit. So the idea it was to try to obtain this space in order to be used in a temporary way. In the parallel, because the phenomena they was negatively perceived, a lot of space they start to be fenced. By example, this entry it was fenced. This pedestrian area, like a semi-private, it was fenced too. And this public square, it was fenced by the city hall for without any real reason, in fact, just because people they scare by the public space with bad views. So our idea it was to try to use this negative aspects in a positive way. So we started in 2001 by talking with people. So you just move it in this area, so you don't know nobody in the area on the beginning. So step by step, you try to know people, to know what they want, what they are able to offer, or to how they could be involved in the area, maybe by doing collectively the activity for child, for kids, maybe gardening, etc. So you started to put together all this imaginary possible to be reactivated in a positive way. So you display the results of the consultation in different public space, in windows, commercial windows or other kind, and you diffuse a lot the idea of the project by this kind of fanzines or poster in order to build collectively imaginary desire, together with people, so to meet with them. And so this is the map of the empty space. There are a lot. There was a lot. They remain, some of them, and some of them they are from the railway company who reduce or they change their activity. Some of the ones they are private, or the ones they are public, and mapping them. And parallel, we map possible cartography of the potential local actors. So volunteers, schools, non-profit organizations, etc. Possible to be interested in an area around them. Yeah? And in this way, it was possible to argue to different owners to obtain a space and to be involved together by us, by our very small non-profit organization. AAA started just some months before, together with some other local people. So this was approach. And we started with nothing, without money, so we planned to use a lot of the leftover materials of local waste and more or less waste, and by pallets and other ones. So the project, it was very much built by recycling, finally, in a very ecological way. So in 2002, you obtained a 300 square meter place here in a courtyard of a farmhouse, industrial building from the railway company. And we tried to imagine on the beginning a mobile unit, possible to move from a place to another one in function of the availability of the places. And mobile garden too, because one of the more appreciated and necessary urban device discussed by the people via our discussion, it was a garden. So imagine a mobile garden using pallets, and so we made with Spill and from Sheffield user guide in order to explain how to grow and to self-build the project. And by example, here there are some pictures of the same day, and some people they come in order to try to obtain a plot, individual or familial plot, and the idea it was to be built by themselves by a very simple way of self-building. And sometimes some neighborhood, some people from involved in the garden from some weeks before, they come to help them. The kids, African original kids, they come to help too. And on the final of the day, the family has a garden and a lot of social relation, or a lot of neighborhood relation. It's really a problem, because in the city, in the actual city, in this kind of urban island, like in this area, the social relations, they are very difficult, they are very reduced, in fact. They are not a place in order to develop this kind of relations. And anyway, in metropolitan situation, the stability is less and less strong, like in traditional society. So there are a lot of sociologists, like, for example, Alain Touraine, a French sociologist, who speak about the death of the city because the social relation disappear, and the city is based on social relations. So destroying social relations destroys the city. So by this simple collective co-construction, the people, they build something, they build social relations, neighborhood social relations. And there was a lot of other activities, like cleaning the space, because later you are able to obtain more space. So from 300 square meters, we passed to 3,000 square meters. So it was necessary to be clean. The people, the residents, they start to be empowered to transform the place, to transform the fence in order to be more visible, to pass the vegetation from interior to exterior, and step by step they start to meet usually and frequently together to do projects together, like here and like here too, and sometimes with local people, like this Maghrebian North African guy who cooked together with a Japanese artist, and they cook mixed kitchen, and step by step observing and being involved in everyday life with all the users in the project, we try to follow their desire and their real activity and use by building small mobile devices like mobile urban kitchen in order to be able to cook better, like here, and a mobile library, a mobile tool bank, a mobile media lab, etc., in order to help and to follow the activity who appear step by step in order of the people involved in the project. A lot of device that was built in a very temporary way, very just adapted for some days or from a week in order to host a bee maker, to host artistic installation, etc. But some of them they was fixed. And in fact, the project it was built layer by layer from the empty space by co-building, by gardening, by construction, and this decision together by communication. This one, by example, is image from the media lab who mix local people. Some of them they are without papers, with media activists from Europe, and they have common topics to discuss. There are political discussions, economical activity, and public events like this one. And this kind of public events are very important because they mix together speaking about local topics interesting for the users and for the people involved in the project, like temporary use of urban space, like local economy, like recycling resources, etc. So we invite together with them specialists, politicians, sociologists, etc. And what is important in this kind of public events, it was the possibility of local residents involved in the project to speak publicly, to argue about some topics, and in this way to co-construct the discourse of the project. So the project it was physically built, and at the same time it was symbolically and discursively built together with them. And this is very important because the discourse is a position of power, according to Foucault. So it was more important for us to build together with them the discourse of the project because it's a power position for us, but for them too. And it was a possibility for us to go out from the project, to leave the project, and to give the possibility to people to continue the project with the same ideas, with the same value, with the same goals. And there are a lot of situations in this image. There are people who play, young people who play football, people who play music, some of them they build new modules, and they are tolerate together, and this is very important because they know each other. Some of them they are local, some of them they are not local. There was a lot of key distributed in order to help them to self-run with us the project. So it was a way to pass from management to co-management of the space on the project and activity with them. And in 2005, the space it was bought by the City Hall from the railway company, and the City Hall, if they was involved financially in the project in the last 2 years, they tried to evict the project in order to go faster and to develop a new big project. And the citizens, the residents, they don't agree with that because some of them, they testimony to be crucial space for them, a crucial space in their everyday life. They refuse to return home to watch TV every evening, is what they say. They refuse to destroy this project in which they were able to develop their subjectivity, their skills, and they come with us to the City Hall to reclaim new locations. So you obtain new location and you move by hand all the project from the first initial location to a new one, and again a temporary new location. And in this moment, AAA start to leave the project, progressively in order to offer the possibility to people who want to run the project to do by themselves, so to pass from the initial phase of management of the project by us to the second location who was co-managed, and to pass to self-management. And the second location, it was again demolished because it was a temporary one, and they was really able to find new location, to negotiate, and to move third time the project. And now they prepare a new location. And starting with 2006, we tried to understand better and to represent the project. And so this is the initial map of the area with a lot of empty space. This one there, both of us, with nobody, none on the area, because it just moved on the area, with our students from Paris and two other people, sociologists and architects from Paris, connected together principally by two reasons. One is architecture in red, another one is activism or local citizen action in brown. And in 2002, they are not only there. We opened the space, and in 2003 there are more and more local people involved, together with people who come from the other part of Paris and people who come regularly from other cities, from France or Europe. And they are connected by different reasons, by different activity and desires. Of course, architecture and brown, a little less, but there are a lot of connection for free time and leisure in yellow, for gardening in green, for culture and diffusion in blue, for economy and other ones. And in fact, they doing this activity, they create small social groups connected together by different desire and activities. And in 2004 there was more and more. And what is interesting, starting with this only location, in 2005 we moved to the new 4 locations of the project. There was more, but smallest. And the social relations, they remain more or less the same like before. And this is what we call something like social sustainability, who is possible even if the physical reality is temporary or is mobile. And another important point in this diagram is people, except us, there are other ones involved in different activities, and these people, they are key member of the project, possible to, with the possibility to continue to run the project, because they know and they have information about all the activity of the project, cultural activity, economical, management, etc. And this is not a nice diagram, of course, it's very commercial one, like a cold bar. We try to represent more or less the same desire, the same activity, but this time in a timeline. So this is a timeline 2001, 3, and 5. And with the two of us entering in the project, much more for architecture, our students for architecture too, and when you open the project publicly, they come, a lot of people, they come for leisure, for free time, later for gardening, for culture, etc. And this timeline is the same, but it's in an isometric way, so the time is equal from one to another one. So, and it's better to observe the few people involved in the project in the 2 first years. There are much more architects and students, and for different institutional administrative approach. And starting with 2003, the project, it was more and more developed with local people and other people involved for a lot of other activity. Some of them they come individually, some of them they come by group, like kids, like students. And in the winter there are much more cultural activity. What is interesting too is that some people they come for gardening, by example, and they shift later for cultural activity or for economical ones. And in 2005, when you was forced to fight in order to save the project and to move the project in a new location, the political activities start again to be very important. So some people who come for leisure, they start to be political citizens. For us it's very important, because this political dimension it's missing ordinarily in our social metropolitan life, in our everyday life. So in order to try to save the project, the people, they was in a way forced by themselves to be political actors. And for us, it's a very important plus product of the project. This critical situation, in fact, it was very positive in order to provoke and to offer the occasion for them to begin political action.
I think also that we realize in this diagram that the type of architecture that we are doing is also an architecture of subject, and that kind of generates processes of resubjectivation, and the fact of arriving to, let's say, to have as an output a collective political subject through this project was a very, very important output of the project. Should I continue? So these are other ways of representing the processes, because these are processes. They are not projects, buildings or objects. The process is the very, I would say, output of the project. And yeah, so this shows the process of passing from research, partnership to a period of co-management after a negotiation. Then, when we left the project, the user association was managed to negotiate and to self-manage the space that was obtained. And these are the 3 spaces that where the project has been installed in the last few years. This is also an interesting diagram, which is about the type of activities that took place when we see that we started with architecture, a lot of leisure activity, but also other types of activities, and there were peaks. And even at the moment when we were treated with eviction, there was a peak of activity, and this was a very important momentum that we have played on, and this helped us to negotiate the next space. And somehow, in a smaller space, the same complexity of activity took place. And also we can see that architecture, in fact, takes place all along the project, so it's not something that is at the beginning and then is just used. So architecture was incremental and participatory, and even now the users are still continuing to add pieces, transform the space, and so on. And this is another interesting one, which is about the economy of the project. We see here the type of funding that we have, so the sort of income that was associated with the project, and here it's the labor that we have put in the project, and we can see that it was, the light green is voluntary work, and this is paid work, the dark green. So we can see that a lot of work that has been put into the project was on a voluntary basis, but we wanted to quantify, because this belongs to another type of economy that has also to be accounted in such projects. And that now we obtain to have some funded posts that are somehow balancing the sort of income that is coming into the project. So I think it's very important to see also that there were very, very diverse types of funding, so that the different colors represent different sources, and I think this was important for the sustainability of the project, that we were not kind of dependent on only one source. And this is another way of showing the type of project that EcoBox was, which was more of a network of agencies that were generated by, let's say, spaces, architectural objects, and groups of people. And our architectural pieces were these, and they were all kind of important nodes, important plugs in these networks of actors. They were actors themselves. And somehow the story is that we started in one location and with one project, then that we have moved in 3 other locations, so other corners of the neighborhood have been activated, and this project became an example, a model for another project that we have developed further, but also for other projects in the areas. So there were many other initiatives that were taking this as a model, and now this is running in the same neighborhood, and somehow it is for us a rhizomatic project, because as a rhizome, it kind of started with a model that then became a source itself, you know, like a leaf that can generate the whole plant, has the whole information to generate another plant. So it's another way of speaking about leaf networks. So for us, EcoBox was a model when we have been invited to think about the use of a much smaller place, but in a similar situation. So it was again close to another big traffic infrastructure, which is the peripheric. It was also in a very dense area, but also in this kind of very difficult situation, because it was the remain of a passageway that was closed when this block has been built in the 80s, and it looked like this. It was very central, very close to the pedestrian street of one of the densest area in Paris and in Europe, it seems. But it was fenced and you know, very, very tight, and became a sort of a garbage dump because people would just throw things. And we have organized an open consultation following more or less the same process, the same pattern, and collecting desires, ideas from the people that we have made public and analyzed. And we have also mapped the public spaces. We had the idea that this space will also work within the network of public spaces that existed in the area, and also the actors, in connection with actors. And we have started to test different proposals that we have received in this consultation. First, by cleaning the space, but also inviting people to bring objects that could, and to test ways of inhabiting the space. And I think this was the first, let's say, participatory moment when the space was appropriated by just, you know, being inhabited by objects, by familiar objects. And this is what we came with as a proposal in such a small space, with a sort of greenhouse office that would close the area to the pedestrian street, neighborhood walls that would allow us to have things transversally, a toilet, a kitchen toilet, we say, because we are making compost and collecting water, and gardening patch, but also with the idea that all these pieces are engaging inhabitants in different ways. So this has been built via a training program for youngsters in the areas. This, of course, is there are patches that the inhabitants claim. This was also built with students as well as this. So there is this idea of participative construction or open construction, and the sense of belonging, which is shared. So these are images from the construction of the neighborhood walls and of the making of the patches. And the whole construction site was public, which is also something new. So these were the three main phases of the project, with this informal occupation and testing of uses. The open construction site where you know, people would participate in the self-building process, and this is the current stage where the space is used, but is used in a particular way, because we wanted to there was this challenge of what one can do with such a small space in a very dense area, and our proposal was to test it as a space that works that is self-sustained somehow, so it consumes what it produces, or it produces what it consumes, which means that we are producing electricity that is necessary for all the activities that will take place. We collect water, so we are producing the water which is needed for watering, and also the whole space is run through voluntary work, so the maintenance of it doesn't cost anything. So these are images from the open construction site where we were testing also uses, and also we have used materials. So there was, at the end, an idea was emerging that this space would be a space for popular ecology practices, practices of everyday life that will draw on kind of ecological activities. And well, this is the toilet, and this is the toilet man. Following the same model as in EcoBox, groups of people would take in charge different parts of the project, and this was very important for the current running of the project. And they will also acquire a specialist, and they will be part of the governing system. And somehow we have demonstrated how many things can take place in such a tight, strip. And from time to time, the space is collectively run or even individually run, and at another moment it becomes public. And what is interesting is how this disseminate practices. So it is more or less a model and again a driver of other practices arising in the area. Another kind of architectural trick was to have the possibility of opening completely the facade at the ground floor in such a way that the former passageway becomes again a public space, and this works very well. So somehow this small object generates a lot of activity also outside. And this is how the things evolved, with the different phases and the transformation of the area. Again, in a similar way, we have mapped the process with the different actors, and we have seen that we have done much more in a much smaller period of time, and also this was due to the funding that we had also, but to the constraints that we had. In this case, we were invited by the City Hall, so it was not our initiative, and I think this was also a sort of asset in the process. We have seen also that the architecture was more concentrated, and being aware of the previous project, we were much more kind of instrumental in generating activities, and this is the funding scape, which is much more balanced than in other projects. And these are the local closed loops that which is a sort of complex metabolism that we have established with just very little money. There was 60,000 euros only that this project costed. And this is a way to compare the two projects to see, that there are differences between them, but they are somehow following a same, patterns of process and are kind of perpetuating the same value systems.
So everything is fine, but this is a big problem today. Probably like us, the footprint and the ecological debt, it's a big problem today. So you consume and we pollute 2 planets and a half, and this is a general average. In Europe it's 4 planets and a half, and in the States there are 9 planets. So, Helpfully, for instance, there are some poor countries they consume and they pollute less like an planet, so this is the reason for us the average is 2.5. And nobody don't know exactly what to do, and especially nobody don't want to do something to reduce their consumption, to reduce their electricity consumption, to reduce their oil consumption, their water, etc. consumption. And worse like that, they are the poor people from poor country. They want to live like us. It's what we call westernization. So, and if the phenomena continue like that, of course the planet explodes. So it's not possible to continue like that. And nobody don't propose really solutions. Even IPCC reports, for example, it's a new one published just a few weeks before, but in 2007, because you ask ourselves very much about this situation in 2008, and you used the 2007, the last one before this one, the IPCC report. Probably you know IPCC, it's International Platform, Intergovernmental Platform for Climate Change. And one of the 2007 conclusion is very concerning for us. They conclude the impossibility to act against global crisis otherwise like by global decisions and global actions. It's impossible to act regionally, it's impossible to act nationally against climate change, but against financial crisis, against food crisis, etc. And based on our former project, our idea and our hypothesis, it was to act locally, but in this rhizomatic way, with this possibility to initiate project possible to be continued and multiplied by other people involved in the project. And so with this big question in our mind, so you start to imagine a strategy, a tactical strategy, of course, trying to develop urban resilience approach, possible to be bottom-up generated, possible to be continued and multiplied by people, and possible to be initiated in interstitial situations, because usually you have small space to do quick projects. And so there are three big principles in urban strategy. One is to create closed circuits and resilient network, like this one initiated in 56 Passage, based on, with a lot of activity, ecological urban activity, based on civic participation by bottom-up process, and developing resilient circuits in different levels, economy, ecology, and other ones. So the idea was so the strategy, it was imagined in an average and banal city situation like this one, imaginary one, in which it's possible to develop new programs or to adapt existing programs in an ecological way. So maybe to transform existing collective housing in a cooperative housing in order to have space for sharing sharing device like laundry, like cars or other ones, libraries, and local cultural production space in order to reinforce the local values and dynamics, urban agriculture for local food and justice, and other kind of economical activity, much more social entrepreneurial ones, based on co-working and collaborative techniques, and possible to be connected because they could be near one to each other, connected by bike or by tripod or by walk, and occasionally by cars. And so the idea is to base all this activity in social governance and social collaborative ways, like time banks, like recycling, mutual help, etc. And with the aim to develop intern circuits in each unit, but closed circuits between the units too, like by example the organic waste produced by house unit. Generally it's you produce much more organic waste possible to be recycled locally, so the idea is to be recycled in a specific unit like urban agriculture, and the fresh vegetable products of course could be changed, but could be sold to And in this way, we create an economic new closed circuit, and it's possible to connect this one with water circuit, with local consumption and local production of new products by recycling things. And so the idea was to produce more and more closed circuits and different ones, heterogeneous ones, and to be to try to produce complementary function between them and the transversal one. By example, if you are able to produce an interesting unit, probably there are more and more people to come to visit, and in this way to produce a new local job. So this transversality between circuits, they are very important for urban strategy. And so this is our initial strategy in urban, and with this very with this strategy, of course it's much more complex, but we don't have time to explain completely. So we started to contact different local non-governmental organizations, different municipalities, and in 2009 we started to be in contact with the city hall and the people, some people from Cologne. It's a suburban area near to Paris and La Défense, and with 80,000 inhabitants, with a big unemployment rate, with a mix between urban sprawl and big residential social housing. And starting in 2009, we start to map the local actors, to be in contact regularly with them, and together we map some space opportunity, and we choose 3 locations, temporary some of them available, with the idea to develop 3 units, one dedicated to urban agriculture, one for cooperative housing, another one for social economy and recycling. And we started by quantifying exactly the quantity, the CO2 reduction, etc., in order to obtain new partnerships and financial support. And this one, there are the 2 units, so housing, recycling, and agrocity, with more precisely quantifying of recycling waste, of electricity production, etc., water, economical results. And starting with 2010, we was able to have enough financial partnership, and in 2011 we opened a first space dedicated to urban agriculture. And the idea, it was a 2,500 square meters space with a temporary disponibility. And the idea was to be to include 3 big kind of activity. One is for farmer activity, more professional one. One is for civic gardening, in order to create an interface with the area and social relations by ecological activity, and another one for cultural and pedagogical activity. And all of the 3 parts there include a small cabanon, a small building, in order to host winter activity and other more development activity. And of course, we try to quantify everything like the biodiversity, comparing with agriculture, because sometimes there are conflicts. The local actors, like the local market, the hypermarket, etc., and the schools, all the actors possible to be interesting in this unit. And starting with 2012, we opened the space for the social and civic gardening, and there was very good results. And some people, they was from the neighborhood, they don't meet each other nowhere before, no time before, and they was really interested to create 2 social relations, because it's a difficult one, yeah? With young aggressivity and things like that. This is a professional and farm activity space, and this image of the general site on the official opening, and there are piece of recycled wood on the wall, Petrescu. The space is very flexible, possible to be used in different ways, and include a rainwater system possible to be developed later in aquaponics and hydroponics devices. And you imagine prototype for heating the passive heating by compost, because the compost he could as a period for heating very strongly, and you try to understand and develop like metabolic relation between the building and the land, including the waste, the compost, the heating capacity, the rainwater, the aquaponics system, etc. And there are a lot of study in order to recreate good soil by composting, by different agroecological techniques, and we try to understand which kind of economic model could be developed in this unusual activity for urban agriculture and for the small surface. And the pedagogical activity it is very important in order to disseminate this kind of new use in the area. And this is a building with vegetation on the roof for the biodiversity and other ecological device. A lot of pieces are recycled, including the windows. And the second unit is recyclable. It is a social economy unit dedicated to recycling, local waste and eco-design. And it was a paradigmatic situation for us from urban point of view, because it's a former road who was cut by a highway, so it's a cul-de-sac. And for us it's very interesting, because probably in the future there are more and more situations like this one if you have less way, by example. And the idea it was to try to use the space between the trees, and to create, of course, collaboration with local economic partners. And we build by combining reused containers and insulated with straw, and superposing with the cabanon for office. And so the first level is for workshops in order for makers to transform the waste in eco-design, and the second level, the first level is for the designers and co-working space. And so the space is open regularly now for public events too, in order to change the mentality of people, in order to reuse, to reduce the consumption, etc. And all the urban project is based by developing step-by-step local governance, involving people in the organization, in the administration, helping them to be stakeholders. So maybe step-by-step involving them in activity, and step-by-step helping them to develop their own activity, sometimes their own economic activity. And it's exactly what's happened today. So actually it's you host a school compost, so it's a school for compost makers, very successful, because there are more municipalities interested to develop this kind of unit. There are public events like here, there are seminars, sometimes there are, the space is the core of the area, because that is a private one. And so like what I say, the space they host more people, more stakeholders, coaching activities, and pedagogical actions. And we developed a local database for waste in order to be used by other people except us. And in the agrocity, we developed a small non-consumerist local shop with the local products. It's a small market and vegetable delivery. There are informal relations, and they are the new stakeholders. This is the guy who initiated the compost school with his friend, and there are new stakeholders actually who start doing bee making, another recycling activity.
It's important to say that compared with other two projects, this project has a strong economic dimension, and I think this was strategically important to be introduced. The fact of creating the opportunity of not only living or spending free time in a different way in the city, but also working in a different way. So somehow to have the whole life cycle, the possibility of changing the whole life cycle. And that's why this social and ecological entrepreneurship aspect is very important. So these hubs are also sort of hubs for new forms of working and practicing in the city.
Yeah, because in fact in the first two projects we discovered to be very interesting, but in the same time limited to the free time use. So the people they come in generally in the afternoon or on the weekend, doing it, I don't know, for exhibitions, for music concerts, for gardening, etc. But after that they return home, living like ordinary, just with their family, with their own device, with their own cars, etc. And on the morning, the more of them they work in the liberal capitalist economy, who has just criticized at the evening before. So you leave more of us in a schizophrenia between the problems, the topic, the crisis, and the capacity to act. So via urban, we try to develop new hubs in order to offer the possibility, the opportunity for people to entering by the free time, who is the time more flexible and more in which we have much more the capacity to decide by ourselves, by this free time to develop other kind of work time, winning money and family and social time. So for us it's a very important way to transform the free time. It's like a political tool, and so this is the agro-cité location. So the idea is, starting with that and the two new units, is to create a movement. And actually we open next week. In fact, we are involved in an exhibition in MoMA in New York, and we tried with a local from Istanbul partner to imagine a way to adapt and to give an ecological dimension to the actual very mass developing phenomena in the neighborhood, the suburbia of Istanbul, which is a really completely unecological system. They build towers and towers and towers without any urban plan, in fact, and of course involving people for different activities and this is a very long process, because the people, they don't like to change their lifestyle like that, because you just arrive and you just explain them it's wrong. So they need time, they need a lot of desire. So our projects, they are important for us because they try to create desire. Guattari, if you know, one of his sentences important for us is about capitalism. He say the capitalist has a very strong power to create desire for bigger cars, for bigger homes, for iPads, etc. And generally the ecology don't create any desire, because you must reduce the consumption, you must reduce the water, etc. So of course it's not a desire. So you need space like this in order to test other way of living, in order to touch and to feel other way of desire. So for us this capacity is a really drive of the project.
It's the capacity that we have also as architects, and the capacity of architecture to showcase, to host, and to somehow allow these new practices to emerge.
Of course, in an open source system, the idea is to be used by everyone in his way. So actually, you are contacted by other municipalities, so they start to imagine the necessity to have this kind of urban units in their city. So this is great for us, and the involvement of the people doing by themselves a large diversity of activity, including economical and other ones, is very important too, because it's a way to create the possibility for resubjectivation, because generally they are unemployed, a lot of them they are retired, so they have a lot of free time, but without any quality. So by this project and occasions, they find solution to for resubjectivation of themselves and in a collective way. So But for instance, you're just here. So you need more partnerships, and you need more people to be involved, and you need more people like you.
We have about 15 minutes for questions, so if you have questions.
Thanks for your presentation. One question for you is, a lot of these projects you've described have been one-off projects that have required a high degree, it seems, of coordination by you and the people that you collaborate with. And I'm wondering, as a result of these, do specific localities, the city, or others create policies that allow for replication? Or do you see others that are able to kind of replicate this model so that it doesn't take only one group of highly committed individuals, but it can kind of truly become open source as you described it?
Yeah. Well, I think that this is the whole idea. It was in the first project, somehow we the whole idea is to kind of transfer it to the users and to allow the user to become, the whole idea of a rhizomatic project, to become stakeholders and initiators of other similar projects. But starting with the second project and certainly with the fourth, in which the municipality was a partner, was to take somehow other institutions and policy involved in policy making as partners, not as clients. And I think that this is the very, very important difference. The fact that they have to behave in a different way, to be, let's say, part of a public civic partnership rather than, being in the power position and being those that are. And it's not easy. I think it's a sort of emancipatory project, at least in the situation that we initiated. But nevertheless, we use this as a precedent and as a way of reflecting together with these institutions and to present it to other institutions as a model of being engaged. We say a successful model of being engaged, changing local policy. I think the question will be now how to scale up from this local level and what would be the channels for this scaling it up. And I think that this is the next question. What is very important, maybe we didn't mention this, is that we want to create a cooperative development trust that will be a sort of governing body for this network of hubs, and that this will also guarantee somehow the sustainability of the network, and at the same time will allow the stakeholders, the institutions to be members, and this will be another form of maybe approaching this idea of governing commons in the city.
Hi, Doina. It's a pleasure to listen to you, and I was really lucky to receive this influence directly from Sheffield and others in Latin America as well, like Claudia Mico today in Lima, Peru, and etc. So you've been testing your thesis through different studios, through different pieces of writing, and of course now we have seen this in a more developed way through projects. However, the most interesting thing for me is that you are in always challenging the canonical education, and that is for me probably a great opportunity, because in other ways you are challenging, suggesting the new architects, the new breed, a set of new skills that are well aware of negotiation and all this richness that is already there. So, because we cannot clonate yourselves according to your background, according to your history. So the question is how to put all these together in a curriculum way, and how can you transfer this in a very, very well, in a curricular way that more and more people could just choose this kind of open school or open way of doing it.
Should I answer?
Yeah. Or why don't we take another question?
Mhm.
Well, no, answer. Mine's a different question.
Oh,
Okay, well, I'll answer this. I think it's a big challenge, and somehow in my institution, where I'm having this position, as you mentioned, you were also a student there. We managed to get this recognized and kind of work on this idea of transforming the curriculum in such a way that a student from the undergraduate level to the postgraduate level can choose to rethink and to shape his own or her own approach to architecture. And even we have management courses that are introducing to forms of social entrepreneurship for architects. We have live projects where the students are kind of challenged in working in teams, but also with real clients and with kind of political issues. And we have a strong research in this area also. But the question would be, how do we manage to go beyond the institution and to make this subject and this concern widely recognized, and to also support other initiatives in other institutions and forms of innovative pedagogy, and also I would say how to make this subject and this approach sexy enough, for students to choose it and to be motivated. I think that there are a lot of prejudgments about also the way one would live out of such a practice, yet which is most of the time a voluntary work. How this also is recognized with other, spheres of the profession. How you are not marginalized as a participatory architect or a community architect within your own profession. And I think it's a lot of work to do, and a lot of work for you, also a future generation to do. In what concerns myself, we are lucky that we have also a practice that experiments and can showcase some of the approaches. Of course, we have involved students. This is what we are teaching. Constantin was teaching also for a while. And we are using this a bit strategically also, when we communicate here and in other places, in front of other students. But I think it's again something that has to be transferred.
Anyway, the pedagogy and teaching is not just in schools. In urban, you have a residency capacity. Any units have a smaller residential capacity, so we host regularly people to come to work with us and to learn together doing. So it's not just in pedagogy.
Yeah, and the forms of internship, for example. So, and we are again trying to be in a network, to work with other institutions and other people that are doing the same thing.
Constantin, Doina, thank you. It's great to see what you've been doing the last few years. I should say that we go back about 20 years, I think, to collaborating together, so it's great to see your updated version. I want to ask a question about theory, because many of the figures that you referred to, I teach here in the BTC class, all the French theorists, Foucault, Deleuze, Lefebvre, and so on. And you mentioned all these guys, de Certeau and so on. The one figure who was kind of conspicuously missing was Derrida. And it seems like, I think, Doina, you're the only person I know, the only architect who actually studied under Derrida. So this is kind of like, you have an important role to play in some sense in the dissemination of these ideas. And we actually, in BTC, the students read Derrida's essay on the Parc de la Villette, Point de Folie, recently, and we looked at that and Chauny. And what's interesting when I contrast this work with say, Chauny's work is that he always fantasized about the possibility of his spaces being event spaces that people would occupy and do things in. But of course they never did, at least not I've seen the Parc de la Villette. And equally, when I look at when we look at the text that Derrida wrote about the Parti Laddier, he doesn't ever talk about participation or users or people using the space as such. So my question to you is, I mean, so your discourse today was really looking more at Lefebvre and process-based thinking. Why don't you ever refer to Derrida? Is it because you don't find his work that useful and you find other theorists like Deleuze and Lefebvre more useful in trying to understand your work?
Yeah, I think, well, it's a good question, and I will keep thinking at my answer, but the sort of immediate answer is that I think the kind of politics of the political aspects of the Derrida thinking, it's quite well, it's not very spatial or easy to spatialize, which is not the case with Deleuze and certainly Guattari, with whom we are in a kind of very direct lineage, because one of his former collaborators is also part of AAA, and we were very consciously working on taking this heritage further. I think, Derrida's thinking is much more abstract, and I don't think it's impossible to become operational also in order to work in architecture. And I mean, I have my personal position about his collaboration with architects. I think that he was it was a little bit superficial, and just because he used the word deconstruction, it seems to be very close to architecture, but also his understanding of architecture was superficial, I would say. I mean, he and also the type of relation that he had with architects. I know, for example, discussing with him who was the architect that would do his house, for example, which was a very, very ordinary kind of uninteresting architect. So he was not, I think, at least I think it's a work to be done by someone to make it more, politically radical, also in the work of space. But I was not that person somehow, even if I studied with him. But I learned many, many other things, and I learned a lot about this kind of paradoxical thinking, which is also at work in this project that we haven't theorized a lot. For example, we think that you have to be very quick and at the same time to slow down. So it's a sort of, working with this paradox, and maybe this is a little bit our paradigm, today, when we have to be quick in finding solution to these big societal and ecological problems, but at the same time we have to follow the pace of the social kind of temporality, which is long, so you can't force things.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I wanted to ask you if you have any sources of your work could be tracked back to any anarchist traditions and the labor organizations that have traditionally been associated with them, mutuals and collaborations and so on and so forth. And I wonder if this is something that you don't talk about, or if it's something that you consciously do not talk about, or is something that has only been tangential to your work.
From our point of view, self-management, auto-gestion, it's much more connected with the cooperative movement, comparing with the anarchist movement. In France, there are a lot of anarchists, so I know some of them, we are partially in contact with them, and there are some interesting things, but there are, at the same time, there are some very limited things, socially speaking. So anarchism is very difficult compatible with the social relation. I don't know very interesting experience in social life and social in society developed by anarchist theories. So, but by cooperative way of thinking, it's possible to develop a social concrete project, a social approach, a social theory, if you want. So, for us, it's more important this dimension in self-management compared with anarchists. But you are not against. It could be interesting, but it's not directly.
I think that also we haven't really looked into kind of detail at what would be. We haven't worked consciously on a kind of lineage or connection with particular anarchist theorist, but we inherited this via Lefebvre a little bit, and also something that is probably inherently anarchist in our approach is this idea of avoided hegemony, not recognizing the hegemony of any sort of ideology over another, or so trying somehow to reinvent politics without necessarily following a Marxist route or an anarchist route.
And another indirectly connection is much more by contrast. It's with the situation of post-welfare state subject, because self-management for us is very important in order to give them the possibility to open new ways for people to be more proactive, to be more involved in collective dynamics. Comparing with the welfare state in Europe, it's very strong, in which they are just expecting from the state, expecting from the city all decisions, good solution, nice space, etc. So for us it's more important like a reaction against this expectative situation.
Just to thank you and to say this is really valuable here, especially at the GSD, because I think one of the wonderful things your work demonstrates is how you create this armature for the dissolution also of these disciplinary boundaries, often artificial, and I think the way you sort of co-opt all the processes of planning, the practices of landscape, the sensitivity of architecture, I think just makes it incredibly valuable. So thank you again for sharing this with us. Thanks.
Thank you.